Tom Reed hated the night shift, but it paid the bills. Every evening at midnight, he clocked in at Station 7, grabbed his cleaning cart, and started his rounds through the massive space station. The place was huge, bigger than 10 football fields, floating in the middle of nowhere between star systems. Thousands of aliens came through every day to trade goods, make deals, and catch flights to other worlds. And someone had to clean up after them. Tom was that someone. He'd been doing this job for 3 years now. Same hallways, same trash chutes, same flickering lights in the lower decks that maintenance never bothered to fix. Most nights were boring. He'd mop floors, empty bins, and maybe chat with Greg, the security guard who worked the East Wing. That was it. Nothing exciting ever happened to janitors. But Tuesday night was different. Tom was down in Section D, near the waste disposal area where all the station's garbage got launched into space. It was almost 2 in the morning, and he was tired. His back hurt from pushing the heavy cleaning cart, and he still had 4 more sections to finish before his shift ended at 8. He was thinking about his bed, about how good it would feel to finally sleep, when he heard something strange. A sound. Soft and weak. Like a baby bird chirping. Tom stopped pushing his cart and listened. There it was again. Coming from behind the big disposal unit in the corner. He walked over slowly, his boots crunching on the metal floor. The area was dim, lit only by a single red emergency light that cast weird shadows on the walls. "Hello?" Tom called out. He felt silly talking to garbage, but the sound was definitely coming from back there. He squeezed between the disposal unit and the wall, shining his flashlight into the dark corner. At first, he didn't see anything except old boxes and broken equipment that someone had dumped there. Then something moved. Something small and shiny. Tom crouched down and pushed aside a torn plastic container. That's when he saw it. A tiny creature lay on its side, barely moving. It had scales that shimmered like oil on water, changing colors in his flashlight beam. Blue, then purple, then green. Its eyes were closed, and its breathing was so shallow Tom almost thought it was already dead. The thing had 4 legs, wings folded against its back, and a long tail that twitched weakly. It reminded him of pictures he'd seen of lizards, but also birds, but also something else entirely. Something he couldn't quite name. The creature made that chirping sound again, softer this time. Tom's heart sank. Whatever this thing was, it was dying. He could see a dark stain on its side, maybe blood, and one of its wings looked bent wrong. Someone had hurt it and thrown it away like trash. He knew the rules. Station 7 had strict regulations about unauthorized lifeforms. If you found an unknown creature, you were supposed to report it immediately to security. They'd come, scan it, check their databases, and either return it to its owner or dispose of it according to protocol. Tom had sat through the training videos. He'd signed the forms. He knew exactly what he was supposed to do. But he also knew what would happen if he called security. They'd take one look at this injured creature and toss it out the nearest airlock. That's what they always did with things they couldn't identify. It was easier than dealing with paperwork and potential contamination risks. Tom looked at the tiny thing gasping for air in the garbage pile, and he made a decision. He took off his jacket and carefully wrapped the creature in it, making sure not to touch the injured wing. The creature was surprisingly light, barely heavier than his lunchbox. He could feel its little heart beating fast against the fabric, fighting to stay alive. Tom tucked the bundle under his arm and walked back to his cart like nothing had happened. He finished his rounds quickly, not doing his usual thorough job, just making things look decent enough that nobody would complain. His mind was racing the whole time. What was he doing? Where would he keep this thing? What did it eat? What if it died anyway? But he kept walking, kept pushing his cart, kept pretending everything was normal until his shift finally ended. Tom's quarters were tiny, just a small room with a bed, a desk, a bathroom, and a kitchenette the size of a closet. Most human workers on the station lived in places like this. It wasn't much, but it was private, and right now that was all that mattered. He laid the creature on his bed and unwrapped his jacket carefully. In the better light of his room, he could see more details. The scales weren't just colorful, they actually glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the creature's breathing. Its face was almost cute, with a small snout and delicate features. But it was in bad shape. The wound on its side was definitely bleeding some kind of clear fluid, and the creature's breathing sounded raspy and wrong. Tom had never taken care of anything more exotic than a goldfish, but he had to try something. He grabbed his tablet and started searching the station's public database for information about scaled creatures, flying reptiles, anything that might help. Nothing matched. He tried asking in some of the general chat forums, being vague about what he'd found, but everyone either ignored him or told him to report it to security. Finally, he remembered hearing about the black market medical supplies that got sold in the lower markets. Technically illegal, but everyone knew they existed. Tom checked his bank account and winced. He had 300 credits saved up for next month's rent. It would have to be enough. He covered the creature with a clean towel, locked his door, and headed back out into the station. 2 hours later, Tom returned with a small kit of basic medical supplies, a bottle of universal antibiotics that supposedly worked on most carbon-based lifeforms, and some nutrient paste that the sketchy dealer swore could feed anything. It had cost him 280 credits. He was going to be eating cheap noodles for the next month, but at least he had a chance to help this thing survive. 3 months passed, and Tom figured his life had gone back to normal. He still worked the night shift, still pushed his cleaning cart through the same hallways, still ate cheap noodles in his tiny room. The little creature he'd saved had disappeared into the air vents that morning, and Tom never saw it again. Sometimes he wondered if the whole thing had been real or just some weird dream brought on by too many double shifts. But then strange things started happening. It began small. Tom was mopping the floor in Corridor C when a group of tall, blue-skinned aliens walked past. These were Centauri traders, wealthy types who usually looked right through janitors like they were invisible. But this time, one of them stopped and stared at Tom. Really stared. The alien's 3 eyes went wide, and he made a weird clicking sound with his mouth. His friends had to pull him away, but the whole group kept glancing back at Tom as they walked off. Tom shrugged it off. Maybe he had something on his face. The next night, it happened again. A female alien with green skin and tentacles instead of hair actually stepped aside to let Tom pass in the hallway. She even nodded at him, respectfully, like he was someone important. Tom was so confused he almost dropped his mop. In 3 years of working here, not a single alien had ever shown him that kind of courtesy. By the end of the week, Tom knew something was definitely wrong. Everywhere he went, aliens watched him. They didn't approach, didn't speak to him, but they noticed him in a way they never had before. Some looked curious. Others looked nervous. A few looked downright scared. Tom started taking different routes through the station just to avoid the stares, but it didn't help. Word had spread somehow. Then came the really weird part. Tom's boss was a grumpy alien everyone called Bill. His real name was something like Bill Phaser 7, but nobody could pronounce it, so Bill worked fine. He was a short, stocky creature with gray skin and 4 arms, and he'd never liked Tom much. In fact, Bill had never liked any of the human workers. He gave them the worst assignments, yelled at them for minor mistakes, and generally made their lives miserable. So Tom nearly fainted when Bill called him into the office one morning and said, "I'm transferring you to the upper levels." Tom blinked. "What? Upper levels? Starting Monday. You'll be maintaining the executive quarters and the diplomatic suites." Bill's 4 arms were crossed, and he looked annoyed about the whole thing. "But, why?" Tom asked. Human workers never got assigned to the upper levels. Those jobs went to experienced alien staff who had worked on the station for decades. The upper levels were where the rich and powerful lived and worked. They had nice carpets instead of metal floors, real plants instead of artificial ones, and windows that looked out at the stars. Bill's expression soured even more. "Orders from above. Don't ask me why. I think it's ridiculous, but apparently someone important requested you specifically." Tom left the office in a daze. Nothing made sense anymore. The stares, the whispers, the promotion he didn't ask for and definitely didn't deserve. He felt like he was living in someone else's life. The weirdness continued on the upper levels. Tom quickly realized he was completely out of place. The other workers up here were all highly trained professionals who wore clean uniforms and used advanced cleaning equipment. Tom showed up with his beat-up cart and his old mop, feeling like a fool. But nobody complained. In fact, they avoided him. They'd see him coming down the hallway and suddenly find somewhere else to be. And the whispers got louder. Tom started hearing a word repeated over and over in different alien languages. He didn't understand most of the languages spoken on Station 7, but he recognized patterns. The same sounds kept appearing in conversations that stopped when he walked by. He finally asked Greg, the security guard, if he knew what it meant. "Dragon," Greg said quietly, looking uncomfortable. "They keep saying the word for dragon. But that's crazy. Dragons are extinct. Have been for 200 years. Tom's blood went cold. That little creature he'd saved. Those shimmering scales. Those wings. His mind had called it a lizard because he couldn't imagine what else it might be, but deep down, he'd known it looked like something from fairy tales. Something impossible. "Greg," Tom said slowly, What do you know about dragons? Greg glanced around to make sure nobody was listening. Not much. Before I came to Station 7, I met an old trader who told stories. He said dragons used to keep the peace in the galaxy, way back before humans even had space travel. They were powerful, honorable, respected by everyone. But then something happened. A war, I think. Most people believe they all died out. Why are you asking? Tom didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat felt tight. That night, Tom was walking back to his quarters when someone stepped out of the shadows. He jumped, nearly dropping the bag of groceries he'd just bought from the market. A woman stood in front of him wearing a dark hooded cloak that hid most of her face. Human-looking, with pale skin and sharp features. She was tall, almost 6 feet, and the way she moved reminded Tom of a predator. Graceful but dangerous. "Tom Reed," she said. Her voice was low and smooth. Yeah. That's me." Tom's heart was pounding. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know you. My name is Rita." She pushed back her hood slightly, and Tom saw her eyes. They were amber-colored, almost gold, and they seemed to glow faintly in the dim corridor light. Not human eyes. Not quite. "What do you want?" Tom asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Rita stepped closer. "I need to tell you something important. That creature you saved 3 months ago. The one you found in the waste disposal. Do you remember it?" Tom's mouth went dry. "How do you know about that?" "Because I've been looking for him. We all have. That creature wasn't just some animal, Tom. He was Prince Kyle, heir to the Dragon Empire. Someone tried to assassinate him. They poisoned him and dumped him in your station's garbage, hoping he'd die quietly. But he didn't die. Because you saved him." Tom felt dizzy. He leaned against the wall for support. "Dragons are supposed to be extinct." "That's what we wanted everyone to believe," Rita said. 200 years ago, an enemy called the Vex hunted us across the galaxy. They almost succeeded in wiping us out. The few dragons who survived went into hiding, far beyond the known systems. We've been rebuilding in secret, waiting for the right time to return. But Kyle was young and reckless. He came back too soon, wanting to see what had become of the galaxy. The Vex found out and sent assassins. "This is insane," Tom muttered. "I'm a janitor. I clean floors. I don't get involved in galactic politics or ancient wars or whatever this is." Rita's golden eyes softened slightly. "I know. That's exactly why what you did matters so much. You didn't know who Kyle was. You didn't save him because you wanted a reward or because you were trying to make some political statement. You saved him because he was suffering and you couldn't walk away. That kind of compassion is rare, Tom. Especially among the younger races." "So what happens now?" Tom asked, afraid of the answer. "Now you're marked," Rita said simply. "In dragon culture, when someone saves a life without expecting anything in return, a bond is formed. A debt that must be honored. Kyle told us what you did. Every dragon in the Empire knows your name now. You're under our protection, whether you want it or not." Tom didn't sleep much after his conversation with Rita. He kept thinking about what she'd said, about being marked and protected, about dragons and ancient wars. It all felt like something from a movie, not real life. But the stares from aliens on the station were real. The weird promotion was real. And the look in Rita's glowing eyes had been definitely real. He went to work the next day hoping everything would somehow go back to normal. It didn't. Tom was cleaning one of the executive lounges when the station's emergency broadcast system crackled to life. The voice of Commander Wells, the human in charge of Station 7's operations, echoed through every speaker. "Attention all personnel. We have received an official communication from the Vex Empire. All non-essential workers are to return to their quarters immediately. Essential personnel report to your stations. This is not a drill." Tom's stomach dropped. The Vex. The same empire Rita had mentioned. The ones who'd tried to kill Kyle. Around him, alien diplomats and traders started whispering urgently. Some looked frightened. Others looked angry. Tom abandoned his cleaning cart and headed back toward his quarters like the announcement said, but he didn't make it far. 6 security guards rounded the corner, moving fast. Tom recognized a few of them, including Greg. But Greg wouldn't meet his eyes. "Tom Reed," the lead guard said, a tall alien with purple skin. "You need to come with us." "What? Why?" "I didn't do anything wrong. Orders from the council. Let's go. Don't make this difficult." Tom's heart raced. He looked at Greg. "What's going on?" Greg finally looked at him, and Tom saw genuine sadness in his face. "I'm sorry, Tom. I really am. But they don't have a choice." The guards surrounded Tom and escorted him through the station. People stopped and stared as they passed. Tom felt like a criminal being marched to prison, even though he still had no idea what crime he'd supposedly committed. They took him to the detention level, a place he'd only seen once during his initial station tour 3 years ago. The cells were small, with force fields instead of bars, and absolutely no privacy. They put Tom in cell 7 and activated the field. The lead guard looked uncomfortable. "Someone will explain everything soon. Just sit tight." "Explain what?" Tom shouted, but the guards were already walking away. Tom sat on the hard bench in his cell and tried to calm down. His mind was spinning. This had to be about the dragon. About Kyle. But what could the Vex possibly want with him? He was nobody. Just a janitor who'd helped an injured creature. An hour later, Commander Wells appeared outside his cell, along with 3 members of the station council. They all looked stressed and exhausted. "Mr. Reed," Wells began, his voice formal and cold. "I'm going to be direct with you. The Vex Empire has issued an ultimatum. They know you provided aid to a dragon prince 3 months ago. They're demanding we turn you over to them for questioning and trial." Tom stood up. "Trial? For what? I found a hurt animal and helped it. That's not a crime." One of the council members, a female alien with silver skin, spoke up. "You don't understand the situation. The Vex have made it clear that if we don't comply, they'll impose economic sanctions on Station 7. They'll cut off all trade routes that pass through their territory. We'd lose 60% of our commerce. Thousands of beings would lose their jobs. The station itself might have to shut down. So you're just going to hand me over?" Tom's voice cracked. "I'm a human citizen. Doesn't that mean anything?" Wells looked away. "We contacted Earth. The government is considering their options. But that takes time. The Vex want you transferred to their custody within 24 hours, or the sanctions begin immediately." "This is insane." Tom grabbed the edge of the force field, feeling it buzz against his palms. "I didn't even know what dragons were. I just didn't want something to die in a pile of garbage." The silver-skinned council member's expression softened slightly. "We know. And I'm truly sorry. But we have to think about the greater good. Thousands of lives versus one." They left Tom alone after that. He paced his cell for hours, his mind racing through impossible scenarios. Could he escape? Where would he go? Rita had said he was under dragon protection, but she was nowhere to be seen now. Maybe that had all been a lie. Maybe this was all some elaborate trap he didn't understand. As evening approached, another visitor came. An old alien Tom had seen around the station before, a historian who sometimes gave lectures in the public forums. His name was Professor Chen, and he walked slowly with a cane. "May I speak with you?" the professor asked. Tom shrugged. "Not like I'm going anywhere." The professor sat on a bench outside the cell and was quiet for a moment. Then he began to speak, his voice raspy but clear. 200 years ago, the galaxy was a different place. There were hundreds of empires, all fighting for territory and resources. Wars were constant. Millions died. But there was one force that kept total chaos from consuming everything. The dragons. They didn't rule anyone. They didn't demand tribute or claim territory. They simply enforced certain rules. No genocide. No planet-killing weapons. No slavery. If an empire crossed those lines, the dragons intervened. Tom listened, transfixed. The Vex were rising to power back then, the professor continued. They wanted to expand, to conquer, to build an empire that spanned half the galaxy. But the dragons' rules stood in their way. So the Vex did something unprecedented. They united dozens of other empires who also hated the dragons' restrictions. Together, they launched a war of extermination. It lasted 50 years. In the end, everyone believed the dragons were extinct. And without them, the Vex got everything they wanted. They became the dominant power in this sector of space. But the dragons survived, Tom said quietly. Yes. And by saving Prince Kyle, you've reminded the galaxy that they still exist. The Vex are terrified. If the dragons return, everything the Vex built through intimidation and cruelty will be challenged. That's why they want you. Not for justice. For revenge. And as a message. Tom felt sick. I just wanted to help. I know, the professor said. That's what makes this so tragic. And so important. That night, Tom lay on the bench in his cell and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, the Vex would come for him. He'd be taken to one of their ships, and then, he didn't want to think about what happened next. Everything felt hopeless. He must have dozed off, because he woke suddenly to the sound of alarms. Red emergency lights flashed throughout the detention level. Tom sat up, confused and disoriented. Then the entire station shook. A deep, rumbling vibration that rattled Tom's teeth and made the force field of his cell flicker for a second. The lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in dim red light. Tom pressed his face against the force field, trying to see what was happening. Other prisoners in nearby cells were shouting questions that nobody answered. Guards ran past without stopping. Then every screen in the detention level flickered to life. Every monitor, every tablet, every communication panel. They all showed the same image. A massive silhouette against a burning star. Wings spread wide. A long neck and tail. Unmistakably a dragon. And below the image, text appeared in every language Tom could think of, scrolling across the screens. He only needed to read the English version. One word. Enough. The screens went black. And somewhere in the distance, Tom heard the sound of something enormous landing on the station's docking platform. The alarms kept blaring. Tom pressed himself against the force field of his cell, trying to see anything through the chaos. Guards were running everywhere, shouting into their communicators. He could hear explosions in the distance, or maybe they were sonic booms. The whole station was shaking like it was caught in an earthquake. Then Commander Wells' voice came through the speakers, but he sounded nothing like his usual calm, controlled self. His voice was shaking. All personnel, this is not a drill. We have multiple unidentified vessels surrounding the station. I repeat, we are surrounded. Everyone remain calm and stay in your current locations. Through the small window in the detention level, Tom could see flashes of light. Blues and purples and whites, lighting up the darkness of space like fireworks. He'd never seen anything like it. A guard ran past Tom's cell, and Tom shouted at him. What's happening out there? The guard, a young alien with green scales, stopped and looked at Tom with wide, terrified eyes. They're here. The dragons are actually here. Hundreds of them. Tom's breath caught in his throat. Hundreds. Just appeared out of nowhere. 1 second, empty space. Next second, they're everywhere. The Vex ships are trying to establish a perimeter, but... The guard trailed off, shaking his head in disbelief, then ran off. Tom's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. This was because of him. All of this. Because he'd wrapped an injured creature in his jacket 3 months ago. More explosions rocked the station. Tom lost his balance and fell against the wall of his cell. The force field flickered again, buzzing with unstable energy. For a second, he thought it might fail completely, but it held. Then everything went quiet. The alarm stopped. The shaking stopped. Even the shouting guards fell silent. It was the kind of quiet that made Tom's skin crawl, the kind that meant something big was about to happen. Every screen in the station flickered back to life. This time, instead of just a silhouette, Tom saw an actual dragon. And it was the most incredible thing he'd ever seen in his life. The dragon was enormous, easily the size of a small spaceship. Its scales were black, but not regular black. They looked like they contained entire galaxies, swirling with deep blues and purples and tiny points of light like stars. The creature's eyes were bright gold, intelligent and ancient. When it moved its head, its scales caught the light and seemed to glow from within. Tom recognized those eyes immediately. He'd seen them before, smaller and filled with pain, in a dying creature lying in garbage. Kyle, Tom whispered. The dragon's voice came through every speaker on the station, deep and resonant, making the walls vibrate. But there was warmth in it too, something almost gentle. I am Prince Kyle of the Dragon Sovereignty. 3 months ago, I was dying. Poisoned by assassins, discarded like waste, I had accepted my fate. But one being found me. A human janitor named Tom Reed. He owed me nothing. He knew nothing about me or my people. Yet he spent his savings to save my life, expecting no reward, seeking no recognition. He simply chose compassion over indifference. Tom felt his face burning. Everyone on the station was hearing this. Everyone in the Vex fleet was hearing this. Probably everyone within 100 light-years was hearing this. Kyle continued. The Vex have demanded this human be surrendered for the crime of showing mercy. They believe they can threaten this station into betraying the one truly innocent being in this entire situation. They are wrong. The view on the screen shifted, and Tom gasped. The space around Station 7 was filled with dragons. Not just a few. Not even dozens. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, hanging in space like a living fleet. They came in all sizes. Some were small and sleek, no bigger than fighter ships, darting between the larger ones. Others were absolutely massive, the size of battleships, their wings creating shadows that covered entire sections of the station. They were incredible. Beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Their scales reflected the light from nearby stars, creating a rainbow of colors across the darkness of space. Some had horns. Some had multiple tails. Some seemed to shimmer and fade, like they weren't entirely solid. But all of them radiated power. And every single one was positioned between Station 7 and the Vex warships. Tom could see the Vex fleet on the screens too. Dozens of dark, angular warships bristling with weapons. They looked threatening and powerful. But next to the dragons, they suddenly seemed small. Fragile. A new voice came through the speakers, harsh and angry. This is Commander Vex of the Imperial Fleet. You are in violation of territorial sovereignty. Remove your forces immediately, or we will open fire. There was a pause. Then Kyle laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh or a mocking one. It sounded almost sad. You still don't understand, Kyle said. We didn't come here to fight you, Commander. We came here to remind you of what you tried to destroy. We are the dragon's sovereignty, and we have returned. The dragons are extinct, the Vex commander snapped, but Tom could hear the uncertainty in his voice now. You hunted us. You united half the galaxy against us. You burned our worlds and killed our young. You nearly succeeded. Kyle's voice grew harder, colder. But you failed. We survived. We rebuilt. And we waited. Waited for a sign that the younger races had learned something in our absence. That compassion still existed. That honor wasn't completely dead. The view shifted back to Kyle's face, those golden eyes staring directly into the camera. Tom Reed gave us that sign. A human with no power, no wealth, no army. Just a good heart and the courage to do the right thing when no one was watching. The Vex want to punish him for that. We will not allow it. You're outnumbered, the Vex commander said, but his voice was shaking now. We have 50 warships in this sector alone. Then let me show you something, Kyle replied quietly. The dragons moved. All of them, simultaneously, with perfect coordination. They didn't attack. They simply shifted positions, creating formations that Tom recognized from military documentaries. Combat formations. The smaller dragons formed a protective sphere around the station. The medium-sized ones arranged themselves in attack wings. And the massive ones, the truly enormous dragons that dwarfed even the largest Vex warships, moved to the front. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Tom had ever seen. Like watching a thunderstorm arrange itself into geometric patterns. We don't want war, Kyle said. We've had enough of war to last 10,000 lifetimes. But we will protect those who deserve protection. Tom Reed is under dragon sovereignty authority. Any attempt to harm him will be considered an act of war against our entire people. Do you understand, Commander? Silence. Long, heavy silence. Then the Vex commander spoke again, and all the anger was gone from his voice. Now he just sounded afraid. The Vex Empire acknowledges your claim. We are withdrawing our demand and leaving the sector. On the screens, Tom watched the Vex warships begin to turn away, their engines flaring as they prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel. Within minutes, they were gone, leaving only empty space behind them. The dragons remained, hanging in the void like guardian angels made of starlight and scales. Kyle's voice came through one more time, gentler now. Tom Reed, we need to talk. May I come aboard? Tom looked down at his prison uniform, at the force field keeping him locked in a cell, and almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. A dragon prince who commanded an army of thousands was politely asking permission to visit. Yeah, Tom said, even though he knew Kyle probably couldn't hear him in the detention level. Yeah, I think we should probably talk. The force field of Tom's cell deactivated with a soft hum. Commander Wells stood outside, looking pale and exhausted. Behind him were 3 station security guards who wouldn't meet Tom's eyes. You're free to go, Mr. Reed, Wells said quietly. And we owe you an apology. We were prepared to sacrifice you to save the station. That was wrong. Tom stepped out of the cell, his legs shaky. Everything felt surreal, like he was moving through a dream. Where's Kyle? The Dragon Prince. Landing Bay 3. He's waiting for you. Wells hesitated, then added, Tom, whatever happens next, I hope you know that not all of us were comfortable with what we almost did. Some of us argued against it. Tom just nodded. He was too tired and overwhelmed to be angry anymore. He just wanted answers. He wanted to understand why his simple life had exploded into this galactic drama. The walk to Landing Bay 3 felt like it took forever. Word had spread through the entire station. People lined the corridors, aliens and humans alike, watching Tom pass. Some looked grateful. Others looked curious. A few even bowed their heads respectfully as he went by. Tom hated it. He wasn't a hero. He was just a guy who couldn't let something suffer. When he reached the landing bay, Tom stopped in the doorway and stared. The bay was huge, designed to accommodate large cargo ships. But it still barely fit the dragon standing in the center. Kyle was massive up close, his black scales gleaming under the bright lights. Those galaxy-like patterns in his scales seemed to move and shift, hypnotic and beautiful. His wings were folded against his sides, but Tom could see they'd span the entire length of the bay if he opened them. Then something incredible happened. Kyle's form shimmered like heat waves on hot pavement. The massive dragon began to shrink and change. Within seconds, a man stood where the dragon had been. He looked maybe 30 years old, tall and lean, with black hair and those same golden eyes. He wore simple clothes that looked vaguely like something from ancient Earth, all flowing fabric in dark colors. "Tom," Kyle said, and even in human form, his voice had that same resonant quality that made Tom's chest vibrate. "It's good to see you again. You look better than the last time we met." Tom laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "Yeah, well, you look a lot bigger than last time." Kyle smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warm and friendly. "I was somewhat diminished when we first met. Poison and betrayal will do that. Come, let's talk somewhere more comfortable. I imagine you have questions." They walked to a smaller room off the main bay, a simple office with a desk and a few chairs. Kyle moved around the space easily, like being in human form was as natural as being a dragon. He gestured for Tom to sit. "I don't really understand what's happening," Tom admitted, sinking into a chair. "Rita tried to explain some of it, but it all sounds impossible. Life debts and dragon empires and ancient wars. I'm just a janitor, Kyle. I clean floors. That's it." Kyle sat across from him, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "You saved my life, Tom. Do you remember that night?" "Of course I remember. You were dying in a pile of garbage. Anyone would have helped." "No," Kyle said firmly. "That's where you're wrong. Hundreds of beings walked past that disposal area every day. Station sensors recorded 23 individuals passing within hearing range of my distress calls. 23 beings heard me dying and did nothing. But you stopped. You risked your job, spent your savings, violated station regulations, all for a creature you didn't recognize. Why?" Tom thought about it. "Because you were suffering. I couldn't just walk away." "Exactly." Kyle's golden eyes seemed to glow brighter. "You couldn't walk away. That instinct, that immediate compassion without calculation, that's what we thought the younger races had lost. That's what we've been waiting 200 years to see again." "I still don't understand what that has to do with dragon culture," Tom said. Kyle stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dragons still floating in space around the station. "My people have a concept called the life debt. When someone saves your life, especially at great personal cost and expecting nothing in return, a bond is formed. An unbreakable obligation. You didn't just save my life, Tom. You proved that beings still exist who act from pure compassion. That changes everything." "So what does that mean for me?" Tom asked, afraid of the answer. Kyle turned back to him. "It means you are now under the permanent protection of the dragon's sovereignty. Every dragon in the galaxy knows your name and face. If you're ever in danger, if you ever need help, we will come. No matter where you are. No matter what the cost." Tom's head was spinning. That seems like way too much for just helping someone. "To you, perhaps. To us, it's everything." Kyle came back and sat down again. "Let me tell you why we disappeared, Tom. 200 years ago, we tried to keep the galaxy peaceful. We enforced basic rules. No genocide. No slavery. No weapons that could destroy entire planets. Simple things that we thought everyone should agree on. But they didn't," Tom guessed. "No. Empires like the Vex wanted to expand without limits. They saw our rules as obstacles. So they convinced dozens of other powers that we were tyrants, that we were holding everyone back. They launched a war that killed millions of dragons. They hunted our children, burned our nesting worlds, destroyed everything we'd built over 100,000 years. In the end, we had a choice: Keep fighting and watch both sides destroy each other, or disappear and let the younger races learn their own lessons. So you left, Tom said. We left. We found distant systems beyond the known galaxy and rebuilt. But we watched. We waited. We wondered if the younger races would learn compassion, or if they'd just become crueler without us to stop them. Kyle's expression was sad. For 2 centuries, we saw mostly cruelty. Empires rose and fell. Wars consumed billions. The Vex became exactly what we feared they would. We started to believe that mercy was dead in the galaxy. And then I found you in the garbage, Tom said quietly. And then you found me in the garbage, Kyle agreed. A human nobody. Someone with no power, no influence, no reason to care about galactic politics. You saw suffering and couldn't ignore it. That's the sign we'd been waiting for, Tom. That's why we came back. Tom felt the weight of what Kyle was saying. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person's decision. I know. And I'm sorry for that. But it's done now. The galaxy knows dragons still exist. The Vex know they're no longer the dominant power. Everything has changed. So what happens to me? Tom asked. Do I just go back to cleaning floors while dragons guard the station? Kyle laughed, and it really did sound like distant thunder. Your floor cleaning days are over, my friend. Whether you like it or not, you're famous now.